Steve is our co-founder of Apple Computer. He's a product visionary for this industry, and it's my pleasure now to reintroduce Steve Jobs.
Good evening. I'm Steve Jobs from Apple Computer. We're very glad to be here tonight. It is 1958. IBM passes up the chance to buy a young, fledgling company that has just invented a new technology called Xerography. 2 years later, Xerox is born, and IBM has been kicking themselves ever since. It is 10 years later, the late 60s. Digital Equipment Corporation and others invent the minicomputer. IBM dismisses the minicomputer as too small to do serious computing and therefore unimportant to their business. DEC grows to become a multi-$100 million corporation before IBM finally enters the minicomputer market.
Here is Apple's business model in a nutshell. Sell hardware, sell lots of it. It is very simple, and there are notable deviations away from that, but bottom line, that's what Apple is trying to do. Sell hardware, sell lots of it. Take their hardware and put it in your hands. This is notable in the tech industry because it's unique. No one else is doing it, right? In all of the platform battles that Apple has done in every era of computing, no one else has replicated their completely vertically integrated model of selling their hardware to you in the way that they do. Microsoft sold software, Google sold services, Meta sells services. Apple sells hardware. And so you might wonder then why Apple spends all this time working on software, if that's the case. I mean, everyone else who's a hardware manufacturer, they basically just make hardware, right? They do it differently. Dell just made hardware, Compaq just made hardware, and for the most part, Samsung just made hardware. They just make hardware. None of those companies make and maintain an operating system, which is notoriously hard to do. And so if Apple's competitors sell software, why not just sell software? And if Apple wants to sell hardware, then why spend all this time working on software? The answer is that Apple makes software that differentiates their hardware, that sells their hardware for them. And the best example of this is the platform battle that preceded all the other ones. Their platform battle with the IBM PC.
It is now 10 years later, the late 70s. In 1977, Apple, a young, fledgling company on the West Coast, invents the Apple II, the first personal computer as we know it today. IBM dismisses the personal computer as too small to do serious computing and therefore unimportant to their business.
It's easy to forget that there was a time before computers being commonplace, right? But in the 70s, the spreadsheet was invented on an Apple II, and it really caught on with small businesses, and the rest is history. The only problem for Apple was that in IBM's eyes, they had gone from a cute startup to a real threat in the market that IBM competed in. Who were these guys who thought that they could take over the small business market?
The early 1980s. 1981. Apple II has become the world's most popular computer, and Apple has grown to a $300 million corporation, becoming the fastest growing company in American business history. With over 50 competitors vying for a share, IBM enters the personal computer market in November of 1981 with the IBM PC.
So IBM finally enters the PC market in competition with a new threat that the Apple II represented to them in the business machine market. The interesting thing for our purposes is that IBM, like Apple, was used to making money on hardware sales. But there was a difference, which was that IBM didn't make their own PC operating system. They kind of threw the computer together. And so instead, they opted to license their operating system from a small startup in Seattle, Washington, that you might know of. But both the IBM PC and the Apple II used command lines as their primary interface. And that meant that the IBM PC would initially compete with the Apple II on speeds and feeds. And so it did.
1983. Apple and IBM emerge as the industry's strongest competitors, each selling approximately $1 billion worth of personal computers in 1983. Each will invest greater than $50 million for research and development and another $50 million for television advertising alone in 1984, totaling almost $250 million combined.
Apple had a head start when it came to the software library for the Apple II. Remember, the spreadsheet was invented on an Apple II. But developers immediately recognized that the hit that the IBM PC was going to be with business buyers. And you see, developers were drawn to the PC for its hardware, for its speeds and feeds. But businesses were drawn to the IBM PC for IBM's brand and their brand recognition. Developers recognized that, and pretty soon, developers' belief in the platform became this self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways. As they developed more software for the PC, the more attractive it became for business buyers. And the more businesses that bought those PCs, the more developers made software for the platform, and round and round and round and round.
The shakeout is in full swing. The first major firm goes bankrupt, with others teetering on the brink. Total industry losses for 1983 outshadow even the combined profits of Apple and IBM for personal computers. It is now 1984.
IBM made a ton of money selling lots of hardware this way. In fact, by 1984, IBM's revenue from the PC market was $4 billion, more than twice that of Apple's. And it was clear at this point that Apple was going to need a second act if it was going to survive.
It appears IBM wants it all. Apple is perceived to be the only hope to offer IBM a run for its money. Dealers, initially welcoming IBM with open arms, now fear an IBM-dominated and controlled future. They are increasingly turning back to Apple as the only force that can ensure their future freedom.
This all finally gets us to how Apple actually sells its hardware. Amidst an industry collapsing into this IBM singularity, Apple knew that the only way to differentiate their hardware was with better software. At this point, customers weren't buying computers because of the hardware itself necessarily. They were buying them because of the apps that the developer ecosystem was building for the PCs, right? Remember that virtuous cycle that IBM had created with their brand? Apple knew that they couldn't compete in the old paradigm anymore, the command line. So instead, they put a lot of time and energy into creating a new paradigm for computing, the graphical user interface.
There have only been two milestone products in our industry: the Apple II in 1977 and the IBM PC in 1981. Today, 1 year after Lisa, we are introducing the third industry milestone product, Macintosh.
The point of the Mac was to escape competition with IBM by innovating, by creating a better product. And yes, that meant making better hardware, but it also meant making better software too. You see, the Mac was positioned to be a revolution for users, which would, in theory, make it a revolution for developers too. And that, in a nutshell, is how Apple operates, right? They sell you great hardware by making great hardware and differentiating it with great software. It's part of their founding myth, actually. And it's treated them very well as a company in the long run. The interesting thing about this strategy, though, organizationally, is that it encourages you to hold very strong core values that put your customers' best interests at heart. Because your whole business rests on the idea that the experience of using your product is that much better than your competition's, and that customers are willing to pay a premium to be catered to in that way. That is why the Mac was so important, because it was the first time that Apple had its hand forced to completely rethink the user experience in the face of competitors that were hot on their heels.
Well, what you were saying about like being adults and like sort of, it could be phrased as being less hasty, being more conservative, but really what it is their Apple's implementation of everything as they said, it reflects a value system. Apple has a value system that informs their products. Every company does. But the thing is, the value system of many companies is unattractive to customers, so they don't talk about it. Like their value system may be, we need as much of your information as possible because we can sell ads better to it. And they don't want to say that to you because it doesn't make you want to buy their products. But that is their value system, and it is embodied in their product, right?
One piece of this interest alignment is why Apple actually values design so much, by the way. From accessibility to innovation and simplicity, Apple's design values directly make the experience of using their products better, which customers value, which sells more hardware. What's more puzzling to a lot of people is why Apple values these other things that don't seem like they have a direct effect on the bottom line or on the product experience. And the best example of this, in my eyes, is Apple's dogged commitment to privacy.
And so Apple's value system, and again, it's not because Apple is so magnanimous or whatever, Apple's business model does not involve selling advertisement and collecting information about you to sell to advertisers. That's why they do this. It's not because Apple is good. And you can say, well, maybe, because Apple does have ad type businesses or whatever. And we've talked about Apple's conflicts with their services business versus other ones or whatever. But Apple's value system is such that telling it to customers is advantageous for their business.
Yeah.
And do they live up to their value system all the time? No. Like we call them on it, right? But they do have a value system. And if you look at the amount of work and the amount of sort of technology they put into trying to implement artificial intelligence stuff within the bounds of their value system, you see that it's not like BS. They're not blowing smoke up your butt. They did a lot of work that they didn't have to do to make these features exist and fit within their value system. And the problem is this thing that's sweeping the industry, this whole AI trend with LLMs or whatever, a lot about it is counter to their value system of privacy and useful approach and making it easy for everybody. And so Apple had to figure out how we have to get in on this train because it's the trend or whatever. And Apple doesn't always follow trends, but Apple sees the value. Using value too much. They see how good these features could be. So they said we can't ignore this. We have to do something here. But how do we take this thing that, by its very nature, consumes information indiscriminately, gives bogus answers to things, potentially harmful, offensive things that we don't want? How do we figure out how to provide the benefit to people while still keeping it within our values? And I was honestly very impressed with the lengths that they have gone to try to do what everyone else is doing in their catch up in a way that, like, I bet other companies are looking at this like, they did what? For what reason? Why would they do all that work? To preserve privacy? That doesn't make any sense. It's a go fast and break thing.
But data brokers often take all the breadcrumbs that they have gathered about you, pair them with other data they can obtain, and then share all of it with businesses who want to market to you. And they will frame this as a win-win. Here is how Epsilon, one of the biggest data broker firms, positions itself.
This is a person. So is this. Here's another, and another. They all look and act different, but people are fundamentally the same. They all want respect, protection, and an easier time getting the things they need from brands.
Right, the big three. It's all in Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs. People want their physiological needs met, their safety accounted for, and their search history handed over directly to the Aflac duck.
There's this sentiment that I often hear about privacy in the modern world, and it goes something like this. I don't care if they're tracking me. If you've got nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. But here's the truth. Everyone's got things that they want to keep secret, that they want to keep to themselves. Maybe it's as simple as your social security number. Maybe it's your sexuality. Maybe it's an abortion or another medical procedure. It doesn't matter what. It matters that everyone deserves to have certain parts of their lives stay private.
Some companies can and do draw up even more narrowly targeted lists, like people with certain ailments or sexual preferences, and then sell those lists to anyone who wants to buy them. And what they can buy is pretty troubling.
WREL bought thousands of names and addresses of local people with serious illnesses. This group living in the 27607 zip code have diabetes. These people in 27608 have cancer. These residents of 27609 have high blood pressure. And all of these locals battle depression. This list is moms-to-be.
So we bought this data, and it tells us you're pregnant.
Yes.
And you are.
I am. Yeah, I am 18 weeks.
That's pretty creepy, isn't it? I honestly did not think there could be a worse thing to ask a woman you don't know than, are you pregnant? But you are pregnant, want to know who I paid to find out, has certainly entered the chat.
And you know, I get it. I get it. I get how it can feel hopeless, I guess, to maintain privacy in an economy that is so obsessed with tracking your every move. But my hope here is to motivate you, if just a little bit, to understand how you're being tracked and why you might care about that, even in the face of hopelessness. More subtly, I hope I'm giving you a little bit of an understanding of why Apple might care about your privacy. Remember, Apple's business model is all about selling hardware, not ads. Their whole job is to differentiate that hardware, and they see protecting your privacy as a great way to do that in a world where everyone else is willing to make a buck using your data, especially with ads to target you. And you know how I know that, actually? Because Tim Cook, he never dropped a banger. He never says anything like that Steve Jobs would say in terms of like his animosity. But when he does, it's almost always about privacy.
Right now, users may not know whether the apps they use to pass the time, to check in with their friends, or to find a place to eat may in fact be passing on information about the photos they've taken, the people in their contact list, or location data that reflects where they eat, sleep, or pray.
Privacy is hugely important to us. It's a key value of our company.
As the paper shows, it seems no piece of information is too private or personal to be surveilled, monetized, and aggregated into a 360-degree view of your life.
And we think that it will become increasingly important to more and more people over time as they realize that intimate parts of their lives are sort of in the open and being used for all sorts of things.
The end result of all of this is that you are no longer the customer, you are the product.
The big difference that we're doing is that we're holding that information on your device, encrypted, so it is yours. I don't need to know what time you go to bed at night. I don't want to read your email. I don't want to read your text. This is not information that we need to know, that we want to know, that we should know.
And it has never been so clear how it degrades our fundamental right to privacy first and our social fabric by consequence.
And so all of those things are held on your device, and assuming you want to, you can encrypt those yourself, and I don't have access to them.
As I've said before, if we accept as normal and unavoidable that everything in our lives can be aggregated and sold, then we lose so much more than data. We lose the freedom to be human.
And it's that last one that actually sticks out to me in particular, because there's another more nihilistic statement that I often hear about privacy in the modern world. One that goes like this: privacy is dead. Everything about us is already out there, so why bother trying to protect it? You know, it feels impossible to stay private with all of these companies working so hard to get as detailed a picture of you as they can. On your own, it's basically you versus thousands of very smart engineers working as hard as they can to track your every move. To me, though, that's the reason why I love that Apple cares about my privacy. I trust their extremely smart engineers to do the best that they can to protect me, because they've made it their best business interest to do so. After all, your phone is one of the most personal things that you own. It contains vast amounts of very sensitive information about you, and it tells you what's in store for tomorrow. And I want my data to be mine.
And we're here today because the path of least resistance is rarely the path of wisdom. If a business is built on misleading users, on data exploitation, on choices that are no choices at all, then it does not deserve our praise. It deserves reform. We should not look away from the bigger picture. At a moment of rampant disinformation and conspiracy theories juiced by algorithms, we can no longer turn a blind eye to a theory of technology that says all engagement is good engagement, the longer the better, and all with the goal of collecting as much data as possible. Too many are still asking the question, how much can we get away with? When they need to be asking, what are the consequences? What are the consequences of prioritizing conspiracy theories and violent incitement simply because of the high rates of engagement? What are the consequences of not just tolerating but rewarding content that undermines public trust in life-saving vaccinations? What are the consequences of seeing thousands of users join extremist groups and then perpetuating an algorithm that recommends even more? It is long past time to stop pretending that this approach doesn't come with a cost of polarization, of lost trust, and yes, of violence. A social dilemma cannot be allowed to become a social catastrophe.
You know, I didn't start off with all of the fuzzy stuff, but here's the real thesis of this whole thing. Apple's commitment to privacy runs much, much deeper than the bottom line.
I began to realize that there is, in the text that we have, the 10 amendments that we have, a deep structure, the same kind of deep structure that you'd find in a poem.
Take, for example, the First Amendment.
First Amendment: freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition.
It consists of 6 ideas.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion
1.
or prohibiting the free exercise thereof
2.
or abridging the freedom of speech
3.
or of the press
4.
or the right of the people peaceably to assemble
5.
and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
6.
It's only 45 words long. Could have been written on the back of an envelope.
These days, the First Amendment is wrapped up in all kinds of thorny stuff, like kneeling at football games and hate speech and money in politics. But if you just step back from all of that and you read the text of the First Amendment and you really try to think about what the words are trying to say, you find that the logic behind it is kind of beautiful.
At its core, 1984 is a book about independent thought. It was no accident that Apple chose it as a theme for the launch of the Mac.
IBM wants it all and is aiming its guns on its last obstacle to industry control, Apple. Will Big Blue dominate the entire computer industry, the entire information age? Was George Orwell right?
Orwell was a democratic socialist, which is why so many of his works addressed totalitarianism and why 1984 was concerned with mass surveillance. Privacy, it turns out, is a necessary prerequisite to independent thought. And independent thought is a necessary prerequisite to a healthy democracy.
The order of the words in the First Amendment is the life cycle of a democratic idea. So those first 2 clauses,
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof,
create a free space inside your mind to think and believe as you wish.
That's the founders saying that space inside your head where you think your thoughts, that's sacred. The government can't touch that.
Without that free space, there can be no self-government.
So that's the first idea, the freedom of your thoughts.
Apple came into being around the radical countercultural ideas of the 60s and 70s. Its DNA is wound around the idea that computers were meant to be great tools of individualism and rebellion, that computers needed to be easy to use so that everyone could harness their power, that a computer needed to break free from the centralized systems of control and surveillance that previously existed, and that if a computer wasn't yours, it was dangerous, that a personal computer was profound because it was just that, personal.
Hello, I am Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag.
1
It sure is great to get out of that bag. And accustomed as I am to public speaking, I'd like to share with you a maxim I thought of the first time I met an IBM mainframe. Never trust a computer you can't lift. Obviously I got caught, but right now I'd like to sit back and listen. So it is with considerable pride that I introduce a man who's been like a father to me, Steve Jobs.
Bear with me here, but there is a long and storied history of handles on Apple computers. The very first Mac had one. The iMac, the computer that literally saved the company and cemented Johnny Ive as a design visionary that would define literally the entire tech design for many decades to come, had one. Later Mac Pros would also have them too. And Johnny Ive once explained the reason for the handle. He said this: back then, people weren't comfortable with technology. If you're scared of something, then you won't touch it. I could see my mom being scared to touch it. So I thought, if there's this handle on it, it makes a relationship possible. It's approachable. It's intuitive.
Wait! Ah, damn, you're always sneaking up on me. Surprise! It's your new computer.
Whoa. It's blue.
Yeah, and it's a lot more fun than your old one. It's got this handle, so it's like a little purse.
And let me tell you a few other really great things about this. One of the most incredible, it has a handle.
And I got you one of these zip drives, so you start backing up your work now.
Well, I don't even know how to use that, and I don't need it. I have my own system. It works just fine.
Oh, yeah, right. You sure about that?
Yeah, I am. I'm not ready for a new computer. I'm still waiting to hear back about my old one. My whole life is on that computer.
And that's just it, isn't it? Apple's whole mission is about making a computer that's for the rest of us. A computer that's so approachable that you'll carry it around. A computer that's yours. A computer you can lift. But notably, most of the other big tech giants out there want you using computers that are theirs, I guess is the best way I can put it. Microsoft wants you to use and write software that runs on their mainframe. Google does too. So does Amazon, so does Facebook and Oracle. The world we live in is one of computers that we can't lift. And that, it turns out, is emblematic of the privacy landscape that we live in as well. I think that gets at the core of the whole thing in my eyes. All of these other companies have built businesses whose core interests are in keeping computing power centralized rather than distributing that power to the individual. And Apple, on the other hand, has it the exact opposite way. Their core interest is getting computing power to you and then protecting your trust in the computer as it fits deeper and deeper into your life.
Will the future belong to the innovations that make our lives better, more fulfilled, and more human? Or will it belong to those tools that prize our attention to the exclusion of everything else, compounding our fears and aggregating extremism to serve ever more invasively targeted ads over all other ambitions? At Apple, we made our choice a long time ago. We believe that ethical technology is technology that works for you. It's technology that helps you sleep, not keeps you up, that tells you when you've had enough, that gives you space to create or draw or write or learn, not refresh just one more time. It's technology that can fade into the background when you're on a hike or going for a swim, but is there to warn you when your heart rate spikes or help you when you've had a nasty fall. And that all of this always puts privacy and security first, because no one needs to trade away the rights of their users to deliver a great product. Call us naive, but we still believe that technology made by people, for people, and with people's well-being in mind is too valuable a tool to abandon. We still believe that the best measure of technology is the lives it improves. We are not perfect. We will make mistakes. That's what makes us human. But our commitment to you, now and always, is that we will keep faith with the values that have inspired our products from the very beginning. Because what we share with the world is nothing without the trust our users have in it.
So that's why the Mac has a handle. To help you invite the computer into your life, to make the computer approachable, but more importantly, to remind you about how your computer was independent from the mainframe, how it was as radically individual as you are. The idea of powering users to express themselves, to get more done, to have a place to explore their thoughts is not just some slick marketing slogan. It is as foundational a value to the company as it is to America itself. And honoring individuality was what the personal computer movement was for in the first place. It's why the Mac was created in the first place too, to escape the tyranny of Big Blue, to preserve freedom of thought, the most precious part of individuality, to amplify that individuality to the point where the best ideas are shared and shared into a world and maybe make a little dent in our democracy, if not the universe.